So I've been doing street photography for almost 3 years now, and when I look back at my very first street photography shots, it's easy to see how far I've come. So what got me from there to where I am now? Well, today I'm going to talk about the 5 photography techniques that helped improve my street photography, and I guarantee will help improve yours too. With that being said, let me lead you into the first technique, leading lines. So leading lines are a great way in street photography to draw attention to a subject, and they can be found on just about any street. Roadside curbs, tram or train lines, railings or fences, leading lines are everywhere. With leading lines, I usually try to get the camera as close as possible to the start of the leading line and use a wider aperture so that a section of the leading line closer to you is out of focus. After all, the leading line is just there to draw attention to your subject. If you visit London, the Millennium Bridge is a very typical example of a spot with some great leading lines, using St. Paul's as the subject. And although it's been done many times, it's always worth trying to get your own take on this classic shot. Let's reflect on what we've learned so far, and then move on to technique number 2, reflections. So reflections are another one that can be found everywhere in the streets. In windows of buildings, cars, trams, puddles, anything with a reflective surface can be used. The best time for reflection shots for me personally is at night when it's been raining, and you can find reflections absolutely everywhere. In terms of the actual technique, try and get creative with it. Attempt a shot focusing on the subject, attempt a shot focusing on the reflection, close your aperture until both the subject and its reflection are in focus, and attempt the shot. See what works best for you and keep shooting until you get the shot you're looking for. It's always good to get your camera up close to the reflective surface, but judge it by the kind of shot you're looking for. Is the reflection the focus of the shot or just part of a wider scene? Both can work, it just comes down to your creativity and the end result you want to achieve. Time to slow things down a bit, with slow shutter speeds. Now this is something I've started experimenting with more recently, and for the majority of my time with street photography, I've stuck to a shutter speed of around 100 or 125th of a second to capture fast moving city life as clearly as possible. However, slowing down your shutter speed is actually a great way to create a sense of movement in your shots, especially in a busy area where it might be difficult to pick out a subject. To do this, you're going to want to slow your shutter speed right down. Anywhere between 1/4 to 1/20th of a second is ideal, but find what works for you depending on how much motion blur you want. I'd also recommend using the viewfinder rather than your camera's screen for these kind of shots, as you'll want to keep the camera a bit more stable. The 2 main ways I use this technique is by either picking out a subject such as a building or an area and trying to show how much movement is happening in that location, or picking out people who are standing still in a busy place and showing the movement around them. Locations where transport is passing by are great for this and are one of my favourite kind of shot. As a bonus for this section, I'm going to throw in panning shots. Panning shots are a pretty popular type of street photography shot for a reason, because they look cool. The actual technique of panning shots is pretty easy, as all you need to do is lock onto a moving subject, use continuous shooting and follow them as they move. Panning shots do, however, require a lot of your own judgment depending on the speed of the object, the lighting conditions and how much motion blur you want, so you'll need to change your settings accordingly. You can always add a bit of extra background blur in the edit, and that's something we'll get into later. But first, let's put something else in the frame: framing. This is one of the most important techniques in street photography that I guarantee will improve your shots once you start to think outside the box, or in this case, inside it. So there are 3 types of framing that I focus on with street photography, and the first is the rule of thirds. This is one of the first things everyone learns in photography, and it's simple but effective. To help with this, try turning grid lines on in your camera settings to make sure your frame is balanced and composed within the rule of thirds. Next up is symmetry. In street photography, this is most commonly found in architecture and is always great for creating a striking image. With symmetrical shots, I usually try to frame my shot centrally and wait for a subject to pass through. Some locations that are perfect for this are St. Paul's in London and the Arches at St. Peter's Square in Manchester. And finally, using natural framing to draw attention to a subject. If you're on the streets of a city, you can find these everywhere. This can be anything from a narrow street acting as a frame, an entrance or an archway. Anything you see that can be used to frame a subject. Similar to using symmetry, I generally compose my shot first before waiting for a subject to enter the frame, unless the subject is static and already within the frame. Natural frames are a really simple but effective way of adding depth to a shot and putting focus on a subject. Let's transition into the final technique: editing. Now this one isn't a technique that you'll use on your camera, but one I feel has made a big difference to my street photography. Improving your photo editing will take your shots to the next level, whether it's learning to color grade or learning to add that extra bit of motion blur in your panning shots. When I first started, my editing would mainly consist of slapping on a preset from a preset pack I bought and making some very slight adjustments which affected the overall quality of my final images. And the best way is to develop your own editing style and create your own presets that match this. I'm not a big fan of doing drastic edits that add extra elements to shots, but the occasional bit of extra motion blur on or around a moving object can turn a shot from average to eye-catching. It's definitely worth learning your way around using masking in your edits too, as this can help you to make certain elements of your shots stand out. For example, I almost always use a linear gradient at the bottom of my shots to create a light to dark effect rather than simply adding a vignette. And with night shots, I use a lot of masks and lighting to either reduce or increase the clarity, depending on the look I'm trying to achieve. Although it may not be everyone's favourite part of photography, learning your way around editing is guaranteed to improve your street shots. So thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, and go and check out some of my other work. Also go and give me a follow over on Instagram where I post all of my shots. If this video did help you at all, please let me know in the comments, and if there's any other photography techniques that help you that I may have missed out, then please comment that below as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.